which again would not be hierarchical. In other words, it's because of its functional role in the body that it gets extra resources in some circumstances, not as a perk of being at the top of a hierarchy. And the brain, as far as the top of a command and control hierarchy, well, that's a fiction. I mean, we don't decide exactly which hormones. Plus, the brain is not just one thing, it's all these organs. So there's certain parts of the brain that are deciding what hormones are released, and other parts of the brain which might be stressing out as a result of that and wish those hormones weren't released. And it's a distributed system. And this is how you really have organizational structures in nature, distributed systems. And the hierarchy is something that's created so that one person can control many people. And while I admit it, and I continue to admit there's a practical value to that, and there's a reason that is, it's worked for humans to think this way. But it's also fundamentally, I overuse the word fundamental because I look for fundamental things, but so forget the word fundamental. I'll just say the thing about a hierarchy is I think a hierarchy takes a group of people and makes them as smart as one person. You take 10 people and it makes them as smart as their leader. They have more hands, they have 20 hands, they have the income of 20 people, they're 20 people. But intelligence-wise, they're still one person. Now, if you have a really good leader, and I myself have led teams of engineers in my career times, if you have a really good leader, of course, they're going to delegate. And they're going to listen to the experts. But see, they're not necessarily in a position to actually know. The faith that they have, that an expert has in their other experts in other fields, it's a bit faith, it's a bit guesswork. Basically, that leader is trying to go around the hierarchy and give power to those that really should have it, which the hierarchy doesn't do. So when I run teams, I don't say this guy works for me, I say this guy works with me. And that's the way I ran the team. And I felt that just because I could get you fired, well, actually, you know what? You can get your manager fired too. It can go both ways, and it's not automatic. So rarely do you just fire someone, you have to justify it to people. So you don't just have a lot of these autocratic powers. But anyway, even if you do, the power to fire someone doesn't make me better than them. It doesn't make me higher than them on a hierarchy. It just means I can fire them. They can screw up my projects by being incompetent. They can break the law and share trade secrets. They shouldn't do those things, right? But maybe I shouldn't fire them either. The point being that we have the ability as humans to specialize, and we really need to use networks that enhance that specialization. Now let's see, what else did you talk about? I know there were some other things in there. I wasn't going to go on so long about just that. Spirituality. I thought you had an interesting thing spirituality-wise, because for a second I was surprised and I thought you were saying we ought to believe in some sort of divinity. And then I guess I saw a reply of yours to a comment in that video, and also I saw the video more times and I realized, no, that isn't what you're saying. And so if I'm correct on what you are saying about that, I agree. Because I'm an atheist, but I'm not really, the YouTube atheist of these styles you see here. I am spiritual. And I would like to find my spirituality, out of physics. It's possible because quantum physics, relativity, they're so surreal. There's room for spirituality, even magic almost, how weird quantum physics is, and multiple universe interpretations of it allow unlimited kinds of ideas. Certainly, you could get as wild a fantasy based on quantum theory as any religious theory could get. Not that I'm advocating that we do that, but my point is that there's a lot of paths to a spirituality where we feel connected. And of course, I as a skeptical relativist, I do 100% agree with you. You cannot get outside of the universe to look back in and judge it as an object. We're essentially in it, and so we're subjective. And then we deduce the objective world from that subjectivity. And I think you're also right. Since we're subjective in the subjective universe, there is a bit of spirituality there, implied, because we need something that, you know, can be called spirituality. I suppose it could have other names, but that is fair to call spirituality, if not to explain, just sort of to frame, to provide us a metaphor for our experience as subjects with the universe that's all around us. And so I agree. I'm glad that the rational world looked down from the heavens, though, because I believe we can get that spirituality from nature. Me, myself, I'm a nature boy. I grew up running up and down the rivers of California, swimming rapids, paddling canoe, checking out bugs and catching snakes humanely. And so I find a lot of spirituality. You know, when people wonder, well, where do the gods come from? They say, oh, people were trying to explain things. I don't really think so. I think where the idea of gods comes from is if you spend a lot of time in nature, you'll see them. Your brain wants to see them. And, you know, I explain that for myself in a very rational way. I think that has to do with that we use humans as metaphors. We understand so much about humans that if we think of a tree as a human, in other words, as possessed by a spirit of some sort that's sort of human-like and gives it extra character beyond what the tree shows us directly, you know, these human characters, and maybe we speak to the tree and things like this. It's just a way of us applying this huge amount of programming, this cognitive structures we have as humans, we're applying that to other subjects because we understand a million details about humans. So for example, with Poseidon, you know, if you imagine that there's a sea god, it's not just to explain, it's to track what's going on. So if you think that there's a human kind of a, you know, something in man's image that is the spirit of the sea, then when the sea behaves a certain way, you can relate that to anger, say, and the seas are angry, and you know, hey, there's a storm brewing. And you could do this scientifically, say, oh, look at those kinds of clouds and the color there, and this is the time the sun's setting, the wind's coming from that direction. You could deduce, hey, there's a storm coming. But before there's all of that scientific analytical measurement, we can just use our brains to see the sky and think of that as a calm sky, or an angry sky, or an emotional sky. And that emotion then translates to actions we actually have to take to survive. You know, get off the ocean. It's a good time to go out further. Here's where the fish will be.